Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to More Media Records Off the Air podcast. I'm Christian.
I'm Lauren.
I'm Matt.
And if you want to join our little group here, talk about music, just be around some like-minded people that like music, come down to More 182 Thursdays at 7. And yeah, it's a great time. You should show up.
Come on down.
So today, this episode, right, we're talking about instrumental albums and like just producers in general and just like what they contribute to the music landscape. And I don't know, I know a lot about producers. I'm a huge hip hop fan, as you guys know, and that's kind of like very ingrained into the culture. So I mean, I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts and who are your guys' favorites.
Well, so obviously we're getting a nod to the people behind the studio and really the ones that are like, okay, you're a big group, let's make you sound good. But like the first that comes to my mind, being a classic rock fan, is like George Martin, because he had the musical expertise, also worked a lot with orchestras, so he knew how to, in a physical sense at the time, how to mic things up, how to put a whole band in a room together, have them all shine through the mic and not have it sound like garbage. Yeah. So that aspect's amazing. And then, of course, as things go on, especially when you're talking about hip-hop, it's way more about how can I use samples? How can I use this kind of instrument? How can I, especially with like classic DJ scratching being a brand new thing in the 90s, or actually it was late 80s. But, just like, it's so much more than just, okay, how do I set up a mic? And that's definitely where there's some really good producers.
I mean, especially like now, I mean, what you're just saying, like the, like producing is more of artistry than it is actually like just creating and recording a song at this point. It's almost like you have two sides of the coin. Like you've got your artists actually like singing and doing their lyrics, and then you've got the producer making the beats and like actually selling it. Because I mean, I know you have said before that when you first listen to music, you listen to like the sonics and the instrumentals first.
Totally, yes.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, like where I'm coming from, like I do the exact same thing, but where I'm coming from is like you have to lend some credit to the producer for getting you like engrossed in the song, you know?
Mm-hmm, sure.
I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that too, there's this new movement of producers, singers, songwriters, everything all in one, once again, the age of the internet. That's like a crazy new thing where people are producing their own beats and just blowing up on the internet for their beats and then going on to produce other people.
Yeah.
But I don't know very much about producing in hip hop at all. I'm not someone that does research into that, and I'm honestly just starting to dive into hip hop as like a genre thoroughly as of this year.
Well, even before the whole stuff with hip hop, you got people like Quincy Jones who did Thriller. He did a bunch of stuff with Aretha Franklin, Celine Dion. That kind of producer is someone that also knows how to take a lot of samples and different sounds, especially with Thriller, because there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. So it's like mostly, I would say most famous producers are the ones that you don't know about, but when you look them up, you're like, oh, you're on like every hit song.
Yeah.
Like something that was interesting that I was looking up was artists that don't actually write their own songs most of the time. It's either produced by a completely different company, person, or written by different people. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but some that I found that were kind of interesting was Elvis, Elton John, Whitney Houston, Rihanna, and like Celine Dion. And for the most part, I looked at like Whitney Houston. She didn't write like 90% of her songs.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the song "I Will Always Love You" was actually
a cover.
It's Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I didn't know that. I'm like, this is crazy. Like I get it. She has an amazing voice, but in some way, like, as we are, like Lauren said, we're getting into an internet age where your personality is more sellable than just your voice, and just being okay, I want to buy this album. It's becoming this thing that's like, now I look at Whitney Houston and I'm like, well, now you're just kind of like a shell of what I thought you were.
I guess, but I don't think that necessarily is the case. For Rihanna and Elton John both, I knew these.
Yeah, those were very less extreme.
Whitney Houston I knew about too, to a degree. But with Rihanna, I know that generally there's this like circle of females in pop music from the early 2000s to now in which music just gets sent around basically. and people will demo it. And if it's like, it fits, it fits. Songs will go to Rihanna, then Beyonce, then Lady Gaga, then whoever. And if it fits, it fits, like I said. But going back to Elton John, like, have you seen Rocket Man? I mean, like, do you know the king? No, I mean, like, obviously his lyricist is someone different, and he produces all the music himself. He was able to, like, create a lot of the music.
And he's
made.
not a puppet. In, like, the same way, like, back in the day, I would see a band like One Direction come up. It's like, oh, how did they become a group? Oh, Simon Cowell just saw these guys all auditioning for, the singing show and just said, if we just put you guys together, we make money. And then they're like, it's more of a money thing than it is an artist thing.
I mean, yeah, you're totally right. Like, you're on the money. Like, especially in recent trends, but I mean, as you've just stated, like, even in past times, like, you see a lot of artists sacrificing their artistry for that, like, star power, So it's like, I mean, that's why I'm coming here saying, like the people in the back end, the producers, the sound engineers, they just don't get enough credit.
That's definitely true.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
And, like, with hip hop, there's modern stuff. I don't know, Christian, where would you like to start with this? Because I know, like, for me, like, a big one on the top of my head is, like, Flying Lotus. Mm-hmm. You guys are talking about Dr. Dre. He's a great artist. And then as he matures, he's like, I'm going to go on the producing side, make sure that I can give a foundation to what the craft of rap is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean, with that, especially in a case like Flying Lotus, like, he's doing it for the genre, too. He's doing it for the culture, which is something that, like, you've just got to respect. And not a lot of artists really do that. I mean, I
can name another, though. I feel like that is kind of on that vibe. It's like Anderson .Paak. I feel like he's just like phenomenal and everything we need in this world right now, which is great. I used to listen to, I still listen to this artist named Watsky, but when I was back in, like, middle school, he was releasing an album that was produced by Anderson .Paak, and I didn't know this until, like, this year, but Anderson .Paak was on, like, one track and helped produce the whole album. It's generally one of my favorite albums, but Anderson .Paak, I just always find out, like, oh, he was involved in that.
Exactly.
He was involved in that too.
Oh my
God.
God.
And that and that.
When I spotted him in the Super Bowl playing the drums, I was like, of course, Anderson .Paak's up there. Like, of course.
Well, like, Snoop Dogg because they released an album for GTA, right? Dr. Dre, Snoop, couple and Anderson. Yeah. Like, that's just, like, it's kind of hilarious how, like, now it's more like, these guys are known as, like, greats in the producing world, and it's just like, it's like one of those movies that you're just like, oh, I'll get all of them together, like the Expendables, like, let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, I love this.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna go back to one that I personally have always known as a producer, but also, like, has his own band with Bleachers. But Jack Antonoff is just, like, one of the God's top dogs in pop music producing. I would say he, like, creates the majority of the stuff that you hear on the radio. You would be surprised. Or is in part of the creation in a lot of the stuff that you see on the radio. And I actually just watched a television show. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but, like, I would actually highly recommend. It's pretty cute. High Fidelity, starring Zoe Kravitz.
I got recommended that to me, and I put it on my list. Is it good? It's good.
It's only 10 episodes, so, you can blow through it like I did over spring break. And it just follows a girl along her breakup journey, but it's got Chef's Kiss.
That's on Hulu, right?
Yes, it's on Hulu. Yeah. Chef's Kiss soundtrack. Such a good soundtrack.
I mean, she owns a record shop in it, right?
Yeah, that's the whole plot line of it. But literally, Jack Antonoff just shows up in the middle of the TV show, she goes into a studio, a recording room, and he's just there, just hanging out, and he's playing himself. And she's like, I'm a big fan, Jack. He's like, thanks. But he's just one of those people that I know is, like, always regarded when you talk about producing in pop.
I mean,
especially
like in pop music, we go back to the 2000s. A producer that literally had, like, I forgot the exact figure, but it was in the 90% of how many songs he actually, like, produced for the radio, and it's Pharrell.
Yeah.
Like,
of course.
Dude was absolutely everywhere, and he made a killing off the radio.
Right.
And like late 2000s, early 2000s, like, dude was just on a roll.
He's produced, like, he has been a part of so much music. It's insane. Like, whether it's his own, something he's helping someone else with, or, like, the beats that he creates. Like, I can't believe the amount that you can put out as a human being, like, as an artist.
Yeah, and I think it's a different skill, right? When you think of an artist that makes their own music, you can see from their discography their evolution of their sound, what they want to come out with, and make their big stay in the world. But then with a producer, they more take a step back and say, okay, objectively, like, how can I make the song pleasing? Like, how can we make the hook better? How can we make the verse better? Is this bridge go on like 5 seconds too long? That's a big thing. And even with Pharrell, I remember seeing a video. This was back when Gojira came out with their Magma album. I think it was just recorded. I forgot which university it was, but it was a university in New York where they focused on music mixing. And the one student showed their mix of like one of the singles they did, and Pharrell's just listening to it, and he understands like, oh, this is good space, this is good everything, and like it's a completely different genre than what you think of Pharrell Williams. Like you think of Happy, you don't think of screaming death metal with huge guitars, but that's just like what a producer need. Like I said before, Quincy Jones, Mark Ronson, like they found ways to make things evolve. Like, oh, Amy Winehouse, you remind me a lot of this kind of vocalist back in Motown era. How can we find the good parts that Motown accentuate your voice into a new way that doesn't sound like, oh, is this from the 70s or something?
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, I think that leads into like the conversation of how certain producers and certain artists coming together like really bring out the best in each other, like, and just make like masterclass albums. Like what I'm thinking of is Madlib, MF Doom, Mad Villainy, Madlib, Freddie Gibbs, Pinata, Bandana, Hit Boy and Nas. Hit Boy produced the last 3 Nas albums, and one of them got a Grammy.
I know, like, is it King Ghidorah? It was King Ghidorah, I think. I know he's like also in the thing. I know his album I've listened to a couple of times. It was with MF Doom and Mad Villain and that kind of.
Okay, yeah.
And like Tribe Called Quest, because that's a big also like influence during that era.
Yeah. And it's just like you find these certain like producer artist combos, and it's just like anything that those two will touch is going to be amazing. I just listed off some of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah, right.
Just there.
I was going to say, like, you're talking about hip hop being like your genre. Like, I can tell this is where you're just like, oh, please, everything.
Yeah, you can feel the happiness radiating off of you.
Listen, man, I've been excited to do a hip hop episode ever since the last time.
Well, good. Then I'm going to quickly take a detour off of hip hop. So you're talking about instrumentals. This was for me, like, I guess it's instrumental albums in general. One that I was big into way back in the day during late middle school, early high school was Dream Theater and their kind of prog metal, like really big stuff. But they were also known to have like an instrumental track, which like among the fans was like, oh, there's an instrumental track. This is fantastic. Yeah. Because all of the musicians are pretty much like well known. Like they went to Berklee College in Boston. They're like master classes in their entire instrument. Like the bass player's insane. The drummers are insane. Guitarist is insane. And what was great was during a lull, when Dream Theater was happening in the late 90s, they did a thing called Liquid Tension Experiment that was pretty much is just an instrumental album, and they had Tony Levin as the bassist. But it was...
Tony Levin, remind me who that is.
Shoot.
The name sounds very familiar.
He's a famous older bassist, and I think it was from like a different prog band. Lauren's doing the research, thank God.
Yeah.
She's on it. But
get on it.
It's like when you said like instrumentals, that album, that Liquid Tension Experiment, they did 1 and 2 in like span of 2 years, and then they came out with a third album during COVID. So like when they were much older, but they're like, yeah, let's just do this again.
Yeah, that's a big leap.
And it's something where instrumentals, where I would say, depending on, I love instrumental music, like when it comes from classical to jazz, but a big thing for me is how well does it work if you put lyrics into the song? And I think for Liquid Tension Experiment especially, it's a lot of craziness. It's a lot of stuff happening. Yeah. It's like they still have song structure, but whereas I think some hip-hop instrumentals, they're great. They sound great and they sound groovy, but it feels like they're meant to have lyrics on top of them.
Okay, yeah, I was just about to ask where you were going to go with that, and I agree to a certain point, because what I'm hearing for an instrumental song is how like full and complete that the track sounds, because you're losing the vocal, like vocalist, but you can still have vocal samples fill in the
Well, as
fill in the
humans, we
gaps.
want a person talking because that's what we hang on to for
Yeah,
the song.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's basically just like how well does it keep me engaged without the vocals, you know?
Right.
Which I mean, I feel like, I mean, at least with in the case of J Dilla Donuts, like it does it fantastically. I mean, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Are we at the point where we're ready to get into the
Oh,
album
yes, please.
itself?
Just give me the fact check. Where was
Okay, so the
21?
fact check. I didn't want to break in when it was inappropriate,
please,
but
please.
Peter Gabriel and King Crimson,
that's
and then
it.
also
Oh,
he
King
was
Crimson,
on Pink Floyd's first album. So
Wait, was he?
Hey, what?
Yep.
As a...
What, just
Oh.
like a step-in basis?
in 1987, Levin played the bass and Chapman stick parts on Pink Floyd's first album after the departure
Oh,
of Roger
in
Waters.
a momentary lapse of reason. That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's when Roger Waters was doing his own
Yeah.
thing. Gotcha. Okay, well,
So
thank you.
yes, I'm the new Jamie or
Oh.
whatever. I guess I'm just gonna have to do all the research.
please.
No,
But yes, I
I'm
would
excited.
love to hear all of these opinions on donuts because I
All right.
liked it a lot.
Yeah.
did you?
I
Did
did.
you?
I you got a glimpse of my take, but I would love to hear because no, honestly, I love this type of music. It's the best. When I think of it, I think of cracking open a tall boy, playing frisbee golf in a nice like 70-degree day. It's this kind of music. Listen to Tribe Called Quest that way. Listen to
Really?
a lot of
That's okay. That's a
lot
fun
because
vibe.
I
but
didn't know
nothing
rap.
what I
My
would
friends showed me
expect.
rap when we did that, and I'm like, hey, this is pretty good.
Let's do that
Okay.
sometime, man.
That
Let's,
sounds
let's
cool.
listen to
Now
Donuts.
that's
Sounds like
actually
a fun
warming up.
time.
Hell yes.
Yeah. There's a lot of disc golf around here too, so it can work. For me personally, like I don't really know anything about instrumental music. I didn't get very into it at any point, or mixing, or like someone that's just kind of sampling and taking tracks and making their own beats. I'm not really like a hip hop head or anyone that spent a lot of time researching this stuff. So like listening to Jay Dilla's album, I kind of was like, oh, this is like a new world like I'm
Yeah.
opened up to, and I kind of did further research from there. I really enjoyed my first listen through, but I'm not gonna lie, I was like, that was a little cheesy. It was all right. It was
Ooh,
pretty good.
cheesy.
Okay.
I don't even know how to explain it. I was just kind of like, I get stuck in like sound loops in my head very easily and frequently. So when I hear kind of samples that are repetitive or like will say the same thing over and over again, it'll get stuck in a loop on my head
Yeah.
and it kind of annoys me.
Speaking of loops, in this album, Jay Dilla actually pioneered like the beat loop basically, and kind of like just made this like 8-bar repeating loop and just kept it going for the entire song, and that was the beat. And I mean that kind of like transferred over into a lot of other artists, like what we were talking about before the episode, like Kanye and Common, and those albums off like the early 2000s. But before we start talking about Dilla in this album, I kind of want to give like a little background to the
Oh,
album.
please.
Oh yes, I mean,
Because so
great background.
Jay Dilla, he was huge, prominent producer, early 90s, late 2000s, like pretty much very respectable in the genre, right? Detroit native, hailed from Michigan. Let's
Yep,
go, baby.
Yep.
Until 2005, he contracted lupus and was hospitalized when he had pneumonia in 2005. And he made this album on his deathbed. And it came out 3 days prior to his death. And this was the lasting legacy that he gave of Jay Dilla, which, I mean, whether the album was good or not, like that is just... That's why we listen to music here, like stories like that, you know. But anyways, hot take might be, but the album was very good. I love this album. Like
Not
so
a hot
much,
take
yeah.
in my opinion, but
yes, the
I was
album
kinda
was
messing with you,
very
yeah.
good.
it was really good. And
I
like,
guess, okay, well, I want to get my whole thing just so it's not
Yeah,
interrupted.
let's hear it.
Because before the episode, I was telling him, you know, some opinions I had about it, just, you know, little hints. And what I would say is this. The album is great. I could pop it on anytime, almost any situation where you're chilling, or it's even like there's upbeat songs enough where, you know, it's not like a sleeper where someone's like, you know, it's like something going on with the music, it's a little
Yeah.
low. But there's still low enough tracks where you can sit and enjoy a beat. And I would definitely say, like, you know, my thing is the songs are short enough where they stay there. They're perfectly timed. They don't overstay their welcome. They are funky, fresh. I love the way he uses samples.
Yeah.
Especially with lyrics, because I've heard a lot of indie kind of hip hop music I listen to that's sampled. They use like there's a lot of like cool record scratches into like changing words. There's a lot of cool like things they pull from. Even like someone like Daft Punk, they had a song called "Release the Beast," or a different group had a song called "Release the Beast" that they use for robot rock, and like just the idea of taking someone's music and kind of putting a little spin on it is great. And Jay Dilla, obviously a master at it.
He was one of the best at it.
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming in, where I wouldn't put this on like a top 100 album, is this feels like the perfect groundwork for ways to spice up an album. Like if you're gonna give me like a piece of chicken or like a steak, all you really need for a steak, salt, pepper, and you need to cook it well, and then you need to like from there let the ingredients shine. Whereas I feel like Jay Dilla, which still in a great way, he's just like, okay, I'm gonna take every spice that's amazing and just like put it through this little experience, and whether or not it all combines in a sense that like I guess I would say it's something that I would be like, oh, point this to, oh, this is like as like compared to some of my favorite albums that really like had a lot of good highs and lows. This one I feel like overall is a good like chill.
So,
I don't know if I'm coming across
I'm a
it
little
well.
confused by your, because you're
kinda
saying it's not cohesive, but at the same time it's kind of got this
sorry.
vibe to it.
Yeah,
I guess what I mean is like it's cohesive, but it's not something that I guess like I don't know. Maybe I'm not finding a way to explain this right.
Are you trying to say that maybe like your highs aren't as high as you were expecting them to be, like your hype?
That could be it. For me, it's more like it's just like every song bleeds into each other, which is great because it sounds great when you listen to it like as a flow.
Mm-hmm.
But there wasn't anything that really stood out to me as a song that was like, oh, this is Jay Dilla. As far as like a song is, it's hard because I really like it, but I also don't like love it.
No, I see what you're saying. Like
But it's hard to explain because I do like it. I just don't love it.
Like
I get that.
This album is definitely like an album's album. Like you have to sit down and experience it like all the way through the first time. But I don't agree with you when you said like there are any like highlight tracks that aren't just like
I see the
really,
highlights
really
in it
good.
too. And I saw the highlights after my first listen through personally, which I grew to like it more after multiple listen throughs in all honesty, which is usually the way it is with me in music. But like I said, the first one I came out feeling like, yeah, all right, that was okay. But then as I started listening more, the songs that I had picked out after my first listen through as like, oh, those were the top tracks, continued to be like bangers. And I was like, oh, I'll just listen to that track actually, which to me proves to be a good album. I like it when like there are individual songs that are memorable enough for you to want to go back to them individually, but as a listening experience as a whole, the album is great overall. And that's kind of how I felt about this one. Especially with just like the samplings were so creative and outgoing and like interesting that it kept my attention. And I felt like the album itself was pretty dense, like with that many songs. But exactly like you said, the songs didn't overstay their welcome. They weren't super long. So the album wasn't like ridiculously long or anything. And it kind of like rode on that thing of like, oh, we're on to the next thing. We're on to the next thing. And I kind of liked that it was fast paced and taking me to different places quickly.
Yeah, no, it was like that's a really good way to put it. It was kind of like a showcase of not really different kind of styles, but different like just avenues that you can kind of go down with this production style, you know? Because there's he really experiments with like tempo and pacing with this album. Like there's a lot of slower songs, but there's also a lot of like really upbeat songs, but he kind of keeps the same instrumentals like consistent throughout, like with the vocal samples and the hard-hitting drums. But
I think it propels too, like the album itself like propels itself forward in a way that like makes me want to get to the end. Like the only thing I can think to compare it to is like sometimes when I'm reading a book I don't want to like finish it. There are books that I'm reading right now that I'm like, propelled toward the end of. And with this album, it felt like that kind of experience of like, well, I want to see what the very end is like, even though I know what the end is like because this is my third listen through. I still want to hear it again.
I mean, speaking of the end, last track being Welcome to the Show, and how we talked about this when we did our Mac Miller Circles episode, but he did it first, like, the album goes full circle, like and like a donut.
Like a donut, yeah.
Like a
I
donut.
love the loop donut correlation, I guess.
It all ties in together because he was making this whole new style of producing with the loops, and I don't know, I just felt it was very ingenious the way that it kind of just came out like this. But you guys want to talk about any specific tracks? Because there's some specific tracks where I'm just in love
I will
with.
say, I've heard, before I actually knew this album, because it's my first time listening to the album full through, I've heard Working on It like a million times.
Yeah.
Like,
I've heard
that's a
Working
great song.
on It.
And then
It's a
also
great song.
Glazed, I know that song's fantastic. Lightworks is great.
That's a great sample.
Well, I would say, like, those songs, like, stuck out to me. But definitely when I was going through, I'm like, I went through 5 songs, which isn't a bad thing. I don't know. Just have my
it
opinions
goes a
on
little fast, but like
I'm glad it goes fast because there have been so many especially instrumental music, where it goes on too long and you can tell it's like there's a vocal track like not here, even if it is meant for that or not. And this, the part what's great about it is his use of samples. Like, it adds the part we were talking about where we're so used to hearing a vocalist, like a human voice, that's what we grab to. And he uses that in such a unique way to spin it with the music. It's really not like, let's just do classic drums and bass accompaniment has to be there for the voice. It's how can we make the voice also in the symphony of swirl.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is a great way to put it. It's like the vocal samples are like fully integrated within the instrumentals. So it's like it sounds effortless and like really easy to do, but like the planning and just the creativity that had to go into like just crafting one of these songs.
And a lot of stuff you pulled from. I know in your notes you had one of them was from like the Jackson 5. There's a lot of samples I hear from that kind of 70s.
Yeah,
era.
I mean that's honestly my favorite type of hip hop, like 70s, 80s, like soul samples, like early Kanye, J Dilla Donuts, B by Common, like that's my stuff right there. Like,
it's really, I love the sampling in this album. I say it once, but I'll say it again. It's like
it's the best part about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for tracks that I was thinking about, for like things that I highlighted, the first time through, the like only song that really stood out to me was Time, the Donut of the Heart, which is obviously like in reference to the title of the album, and it is deserving of like the title song. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a great jam, and it brings me into a mood where I want to like continue listening through the album, and it's like right at that sweet spot in the middle, almost like middle first quarter area, that just kind of gives you that push and propel forward. And then 2 songs that I picked out that I feel like some people might consider to be in like the sort of lull, was The Factory followed by You Love. So like, I don't know. I really like The Factory. I know it's kind of funky, weird. It's got like this like...
It's a little bit out there.
Yeah, I just picture cartoons, like abstract, like yellow explosions and crazy like tinging, and it put a really good picture in my head for me, at least. And it was a really cool beat. And I thought that it was like kind of the world turning upside down as a song, right?
Okay.
And then it was followed directly by You Love, which is like such a song that I feel like you can grasp onto because love's in the title. Say the word love you a lot. So you know that it's about like a loving track. And I like immediately when I heard that, I was like, oh, and then the world stood still right after it was turned upside down. Like, he had this way of storytelling through the samples, through the music he created, that like actually grasped me even at points when it wasn't like the very end of the album or the very beginning of the album or the title track. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, definitely.
That's very interesting. Like, especially like the juxtaposition between those 2 tracks, because like one is kind of more funky and the other one's like more lively and upbeat.
Right.
And
it's like from tinny to velvet to me. Like, it's very like juxtaposition.
Yeah, and the same thing we're talking about producers here. A lot of them like have to think abstractly about what makes music work. And this, in the most pure form, is putting music on its head. It's how can we, like, different, like, the way the time flows, because he's playing a lot with, like, scratches and different samples, different tempos, but he embraces that kind of chaotic energy into putting it into songs and having it flow in a way that, you know, like, for the past, you know, since, like, the 50s, like, been used to how songs work. You know, especially hip hop as a genre, you know, it's let's flip it up. Let's make it funky, interesting. It's the street music. Let's go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I mean, I think especially on tracks like You Love, like you can make such like an inspiring and soulful beat that, I don't know, that changes things up so much. Like, I mean, on this album, I think Jay Dilla really like proved that music theory is really just a theory at the end of the day. Like, there's no set rules that you have to adhere to.
Yeah.
Because he flipped literally everything on its head. I mean, especially with like time, cadence, samples, lack of vocals, if you want to say that. But
yeah, he had a beautiful grasp on rhythm. Like,
he did.
the looping aspect was really cool, but I think like finding the individual rhythms that he chose to like highlight throughout the album was like almost like playing a game, like back and forth. Like, you can tell like he's working with the audience to, you know, hear something different.
I mean, it keeps like the audience like so engaged too.
Yeah.
Like with songs like Two Can Win and You Love and Bye. It's like you just want to keep listening because it's a little weird, but like it's so good. Like it just like sonically, like if you try to pick apart like each tone and each like mix between them, it's just almost impossible because it's just layered so well between like each other, and it just sounds so like great and full and like complete. And
yeah, it's the same thing. Well, you know, that Kami said like you feel like there's a sense of this audience having it saying it's weird. And as someone who's always listened to more off the grid kind of music, you know, to me that makes me not like love it more, but it's like, yeah, I own this because I love the way it's not so structured.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I've heard, you know, as much as you know, we're talking about producers before being just like great at making something sound good, right? Beyonce might have like 30 writers just because, you know, of the profitability of being a strong artist. But, you know, then there's also just the side of, you know, the same kind of artistry. Like there's always a new sound out there. And how do we find that new sound? And it, like, you know, it's funny because when I listened to this, I was like, this isn't Scream 2006 to me.
Yeah.
Because all the popular music in 2006 was very, very different, sounding way different. And I mean, also, I'm not that well versed in hip hop, so don't take my word on it. But I really enjoyed how much it was so different.
Yeah. I mean, especially like for the time. I mean, even now, this is a very unique album that you don't really see like anyone kind of experimenting with this sound anymore. But you can see the ripples that it had throughout the hip hop industry and even today. Like when I was talking about earlier, like
Philo to me speaks out a lot.
Yeah,
because he goes
exactly.
crazy with like jazz roots and this kind of stuff.
I think a lot of people, whether just listeners or creators themselves, have like this kind of understood recognition for Jay Dilla, especially from what I've seen on my research on the internet. Like, these people love this album. They love what he's produced over time, and they love the collaborations he's done with others. And they kind of keep that in the back of their head for like how they could change the music world, like you guys are saying. Like, because there's always something new that you could do. But once again, that does not scream 2006 to me at all. But it is 2006 somehow. It was like released then. And I wonder almost if like him being toward the end of his life and him like producing this music that's so experimental kind of went hand in hand together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
no,
I do.
You're going through so much at that time. And I think the background, like you were saying, is what makes us love this music. Like, that especially brought me more joy to listen to it for the second and third time.
I find it also just so inspiring and uplifting how someone in this situation can make a song like Two Can Win and Don't Cry and You Love, and just like having these incredibly just like full and inspirational and just soulful music. And
Right.
like when your body's literally decaying and you can't even move. Like,
Right. It's crazy from a little boy who loved jazz music to like a man on his deathbed. Like that's the crazy artistry of someone that's in pain is
Yeah.
like obviously what fuels all artistry that is known as like intense and beautiful and emotional.
I mean, art does come from emotion. I mean, it's.
Just wrote an essay on that. Lord
Did you?
Jesus. I'm over saying emotional content.
Here, you want to read it right now? It'd be perfect.
Yeah. No, I'm good.
But Christian, I guess I have a quick question for you. So, as a hip hop head, where do you see Jay Dilla's legacy sitting as far as a pillar in this kind of community? What did he build on from the previous stuff that he did in the 90s? What's different about Donuts, and how has the past maybe like 15 years have been since then? Have you seen his specific influence in this new age? Because I would say, you know, my novice opinion about hip hop and rap in the modern age is like the SoundCloud rappers kind of have this whole different area, and I don't know if there's a lot of influence from Jay Dilla to there, and if they did, what would you love to see?
You see, that is a very long and multifaceted question.
Yeah.
But
Oh, it's just a quick one.
No,
You know me.
Yeah, no, it was a great question though. So what I have to say, I'm gonna go to the SoundCloud stuff first. That is a very specific pocket of hip hop, and I mean there is a lot of subgenres within hip hop. So it's kind of difficult to like place like specific influences. I mean, as you were saying earlier, like music builds off of the past. Like, oh, like Jay Dilla saw these 70s soul samples and put them in Donuts, and it just kept building. And after that, we see artists like A Tribe Called Quest and Kanye West. I mean, obviously Kanye West's like huge.
Yeah.
Like
He's been around for forever.
yeah. I mean,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't A Tribe Called Quest literally bring up Jay Dilla? Like he like
did
the
they?
big break was from because that's what I read online is that
Really?
at Lollapalooza, one of the frontmen of A Tribe Called Quest, I'm not sure which one, but literally was like Jay Dilla, that set was phenomenal, and then started getting him on tracks with like Erykah Badu and like, a bunch of other people.
I mean, I was just about to say Erykah Badu, but
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you can, and like as you see all these artists that I just named, like Tribe Called Quest, Kanye, Common, like you can see how the artists today have built off of them. Like, were we talking about lineages the other day? Like how Jay-Z brought up Kanye brought up Cudi, or is that some? That might
I think that
have
must have been
been
something else.
But
Unless we're talking about our post-mortem one.
yeah, but I mean, anyways, it's just like it's kind of like this rap family tree, and I feel like Dilla has his, I mean, pillar like very, very rooted and very like.
Yeah, I guess
don't
I'm
know,
more to
just-
see, like, I don't know if there's a lot of sampling going on in
Oh,
most recent years, too.
Well, it's not the same type of samples. I'd
True.
say.
Not as obvious.
I don't think it's as
Yeah.
not
Obvious sounds bad. Saying it sounds
Yeah.
obvious, but you can tell it's like, oh, this is Jackson 5 right here.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's kind of different because like I'm assuming you're talking from like more of a mainstream lens,
Yes.
which I mean,
Well, I mean, yeah.
yeah, but there was a lot of artists that still keep like the record flips and the samples like close to their heart. Like I know JPEG Mafia still
Oh, yes.
experiments with that heavily, even though his music is in like totally another realm. It's like,
Oh, totally.
yeah.
definitely. Overall, loved this. I really enjoyed that you brought this one up because you
I'm-
always give me these interesting new things. You too, you're out there with your music taste. I feel like the hip hop world has been like kind of developing thanks to you and
Wow.
me.
I love
But-
to hear that. Like I am actually super happy that you guys like this because I don't know, when I was first talking about it, I was like, I don't know if they're gonna mess with this. It's just like an instrumental album. I don't know if we'll have anything to like talk about, you know?
No, there's actually a lot of alternative hip hop that I listened to recently. Like I found on Spotify stuff that came out in 2018, and I can definitely hear the influences in this. Definitely on the indie side for
Yeah.
sure, because it's something that you can work with well as an indie artist, and it just sounds good. Sounds good.
I mean, to me, this was just like the golden age of hip hop too. Like the big grandiose like boom bap type beats. Like it's just, I don't know. I can't give
energy.
enough. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The same way rock had energy in the 80s, and it's when the time is peak, it's the golden age.
Definitely. All right, listen to it. Listen to Jay Dilla's Donuts. It's a phenomenal album.
Cannot recommend it enough.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to our little conversation we had here. Once again, feel free to come see us at MMR. And we're off the air. Signing out. See you guys.
All right.
See ya.
Peace.